Welcome to this episode of Eureka, and we are going to have a really engaging and interesting conversation with Professor V. Ram Gopal Rao, Director of Indian Institute of Technology. I'm sure you all carry a mobile and assume that you have an Intel chip inside. His invisible hand is inside that chip. We are going to have a very, very interesting conversation. Keep watching Eureka, but before that, we'll take a very quick look at his brief profile and then we'll continue the conversation. Keep watching Eureka.
Professor V. Ram Gopal Rao is a well-known nanotechnologist. Known for his hard work and dedication, Professor Rao is currently the director at IIT Delhi. Prior to this, he was the chief investigator for the Center of Excellence in Nanoelectronics project at IIT Bombay, where he also played a key role in establishing NanoSniff Technologies Private Limited at IIT Bombay. Born in a small town, Kolhapur in Telangana, Professor Rao did his bachelor's from Kakatiya University in Technology. He completed M.Tech from IIT Bombay and doctorate from Munich. Professor Rao started his career in nanoelectronics, and for a long time, his research work was in complementary metal oxide semiconductors. Professor Rao's work on low-cost cardiac diagnostic systems, low-cost handheld explosive detector for security agencies, and sensors for agricultural applications are proof of his commitment to develop technologies that have a social relevance. Professor Rao has over 400 publications in the area of electronic devices and nanoelectronics in international journals. He is a recipient of many awards, including the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize, Infosys Prize, and Professor C.N.R. Rao National Nanoscience Award. He holds 32 patents, including 13 US patents. Many of them are put into use for commercial purposes.
Thank you, sir, being with us. It's a very wonderful opportunity. So I was talking about your invisible hand in the Intel chip. What's this work? I mean, what is this invisible work that is there inside it? What was it?
Yeah. So I started my career working in the nanoelectronics area.
Okay.
In all the mobile phones or laptops or desktops, there are these integrated circuits, and these circuits use a technology known as a complementary metal oxide semiconductor, as we generally call it CMOS. But basically, the problem with all these technologies is we are now trying to use let's say a typical mobile phone for a variety of functions, from not just for phones and the calling kind of a purposes, but video, audio, lots of sensors, and the power consumption becomes very high. And you want a mobile phone to be a platform where almost everything gets integrated into that.
Today, for example, some of the mobile phones you even use for banking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So but in all of that, the battery life is one major concern, and as the performance goes up, the power consumption also increases. And my work has always been in trying to optimize the energy for highest performance. So my technologies have all been, I have done many projects for Intel. I have been working with IBM, Intel, Infineon kind of companies where we have always been trying to optimize the performance and the energy kind of aspects, and that is where I have many patents jointly with Intel, and many of those technologies are now in the commercial domain as part of the Intel circuits or Intel chips inside a mobile phone.
Yeah, and after you came back to India, after your stint outside India, you joined Bombay IIT, and then you started to say that I should use my ability to solve problems here. And you are looking at a very, very, I should say, interesting project of preparing in 100 rupees. How do you do a test whereby whether you can know whether you are going to get a heart attack or not? What is this? I mean, how does it actually occur? What was your exact work?
But after doing my PhD in Germany and postdoc stint in US, when I came back, I came back with the same problems what I was working on, and for almost like 6 years, 7 years, I continued to work on the same problems. I continued to collaborate with semiconductor industries, generate a lot of IP and all of that we did. But around that time, around 2005, we started asking the question, can we also do something for the Indian society, something which can make an impact in the society. So that is when some of us at IIT Bombay came up with a problem after discussions with medical doctors and professionals, saying that can we, for example, in India, every fourth death occurs because of a cardiac failure. The heart attacks is one disease that kills so many people in this country, and the reasons are many. The reasons are the lifestyle, the eating habits and all of that. And we said, today if somebody is suspected to have a heart problem, you need to go to a super specialty hospital, and then the costs of the whole diagnosis, the treatment becomes so high. We said, can we bring the diagnosis part to a primary healthcare center, to an MBBS kind of a clinic, and can we make the test cost 100 rupees? Can we make the time of detection 10 minutes? So we started to set ourselves some of these specifications, and then we worked as a team. There were 5 different departments involved. So we started a multidisciplinary project at IIT Bombay. The goal was to develop a cardiac diagnostic chip, a cardiac chip which can detect or which can predict heart attacks, a few days before heart attacks actually occur.
See, this brings me an interesting question. Like, I can understand the cost should be less than 100 or around 100, so that it can be affordable to most people in India. But why 10 minutes? Why that short duration? Why did you keep such a...
No, one thing that happens is when somebody comes to a hospital complaining chest pain, doctors take ECG, that's the first test. But in many cases, ECG can be normal, and yet somebody can be suffering from a cardiac problem. That is when there is a possibility for a wrong diagnosis. And these are the golden moments. If somebody has a heart problem, but the ECG looks normal, then doctor doesn't really know what to do with those patients. That is when one needs to perform these blood tests for troponin, myoglobin kind of proteins, and those tests take time. And those tests you need to, very often, the blood samples need to be sent to a pathological laboratory, and then the results to come out, and that is where they lose a few hours. Whereas with this test, within 10 minutes, we said, can you detect, can you look out for these markers?
So you mean to say that when you are going to have a heart attack, there might be some change in the constituent of your blood. That's what you are saying.
There will be a rise in the proteins in the blood, and these proteins are all like troponin, myoglobin sort of proteins. After the onset of infarction is when the blood supply to the heart is restricted, then the cardiac muscles start to die, and that is when doctors call myocardial infarction. If that is not detected early or treated early, it can trigger a heart attack. And so before a major attack occurs, the heart goes through multiple attacks, and at that time these protein concentrations go up. Therefore, if you can detect them in time, you can prevent a major attack, and you can save lives. But that detection therefore needs to happen instantaneously in the doctor. When somebody comes with a chest pain, in 10 minutes can you rule out that chest pain is because of heart problem.
So you can test the blood, and if that proteins are present, then you can assume that most likely you are suffering from a heart attack, or possibly. If there is no protein, then maybe it's something else. I mean, you don't have to worry. That's a kind of... So how does this test actually work?
So this is a simple, like what one does for a glucose test. It's also with a pinprick one should be able to do this test. So that was a problem statement that we made ourselves, and we formed a team at IIT Bombay, and we got funded from a Government of India agency called a DRDO sponsored program, NPSM, National Program on Smart Materials. So we built a multidisciplinary team. We got funding from a DRDO program, and then we started working together. For the first time, we had a project at IIT Bombay that spanned 5 different departments, not just one single discipline kind of a thing. And then we did a top-down kind of an approach. We said, in order to meet this price point, this time range for detection, what is the technology that we need to build, and what is required to eventually realize that prototype. So from the beginning, we had in mind a commercial possibility, or rather a society kind of a relevance. So the social aspect was part of the problem. And so once we started working with that mindset, otherwise in academic institutions, very often, we do research to publish papers. But for the first time here, we said we will do research to solve a problem.
Solve a problem.
So we put the problem first.
It's an interesting point, and we need to continue this discussion, but we'll take a very short break. We'll take a very short break. Don't go away. After the break, we are going to have very interesting discussions on many other areas also. It's just not heart attack, but also about farming. We are going to talk about many such interesting areas. Keep watching Eureka. After a short break, we'll come back again. Welcome back to Eureka, and we are having a very engaging and interesting conversation with Professor V. Ram Gopal of Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. He is a director over there, and then before the break, we were talking about his work in developing a low-cost, very fast technology to identify whether you will get heart attack or not, predict heart attack or not. This same technology, I believe you are also trying to customize to detect explosives.
So once we started working on the cardiac thing, in order to solve that problem, we had to work on a technology. So we worked on a nanomechanical platform in order to detect the binding between antibodies and antigen, which is the way we could detect those proteins. And that is a technology which we transferred. We incubated a company out of that called NanoSniff Technologies Private Limited at IIT Bombay. It is a company right now at IIT Bombay in the tech park. And so once we developed the platform, and once NanoSniff took it over and started working on it further, and they have been able to do many more things based on what we originally started in the research laboratory. So we moved on to looking at using the same platform for detection of other receptors. And in all these cases, what one is saying is you have a platform that detects a binding between a receptor and an analyte. Let's say
so something like, say for example, if I have a paper and put oil over it and then hang it, any dust particle will attach to it. So something like that is what is happening here, right? And when that attachment happens, you want to detect whether the attachment has happened or not.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what you're calling
that
it.
That is what exactly.
Okay.
So that's a very good analogy. And so what we started doing was but that we can detect very sensitively, very selectively, because the coating that you have, the receptor that you have, that should bind only to the target which you have in mind and not to anything else.
Okay.
So therefore, once we developed the platform for cardiac kind of applications, we started using the same platform for explosive detection.
Okay.
Around that time, in about 2007-2008 time frame, there were attacks in Pune, the bomb kind of blast and all that. So one of the things which we were given as a problem by the principal scientific advisor's office was they said, can you detect these explosives, like what a sniffer dog would do?
Okay.
Because we cannot have dogs everywhere, but you can have an electronic nose, an electronic platform which can smell explosives.
Okay.
So which we would call an electronic nose. They said, since you have this platform which can detect those binding events between the host and the guest, so can you use the same platform for detecting explosives?
Okay.
So we again went back to our chemists and biologists, and we again built a team. And since we had already developed the platform, our major goal was to look for the receptors or the binding molecules which will bind only to vapors of explosive.
Okay.
And then once the detection happens, we have the rest of the things ready.
Okay.
The detection and all of that which we were already comfortable with because of our earlier experience. And then we started working on that project as part of a principal scientific advisor funded project. And then so there again we built a prototype and we started testing it, and that technology also we licensed following the IIT Bombay procedures to NanoSniff Technologies, which we had earlier incorporated at IIT Bombay. So that is also, these are the two technologies which NanoSniff took over, and then now the explosive detector, they further developed it, and now that they hope to launch it in the market pretty soon. They are in very final stages of launching it in the market.
The other area which you have worked and completely very different from it, I mean, if one is going to look from outside, is precision agriculture. Agriculture, explosive, cardiac arrest, increasing the battery life. I mean, one doesn't seem to see any connection, but seems to be there, right?
Yeah. So once we essentially the platform that we use for many of these applications is the same. Now the technologies that one requires to fabricate a chip inside a mobile phone is exactly same as the technologies that you will require to fabricate the sensor for cardiac diagnosis or the sensors for explosive detection. So that the technologies, the way you fabricate them is identical, and between the cardiac diagnosis part and the and the explosive detection, even the platform also is similar.
Same. Okay.
So there was a connection. There is a running thread between all of these
So
technologies.
what is this precision agriculture work that you worked on?
So one of the things we also started looking at was about 4 years ago. We had a meeting with scientists from Indian Council for Agricultural Research, and when we started meeting with them, which was organized by the Principal Scientific Advisor's Office. So in one of the meetings in Delhi, where they had brought together many of us working in sensor platforms and agricultural scientists. So once we started talking to each other, they told us many problems, saying that in India currently, for example, even we did not know some of these facts. One of the things was 80% of water in a state like Maharashtra is used for agriculture, and the water levels in states like Punjab and everywhere are falling at an alarming kind of a rate.
Yes.
And that is when even Prime Minister Modi came up with the slogan "Per drop, more crop." And saving water is a big issue right now. And secondly, more than 50% of Indian population in some way or the other connected to agriculture, but its contribution to GDP is only about 16%. So there is an urgent need to boost the productivity levels, as the government also says, by 2022 doubling the farmers' income and saving water. These are all very important problems for the country. And one of the things that you need to use in all of that is technology. Technology can be an enabler for all of this, whether it is for reducing water or for boosting the productivity of agriculture. We need to make use of technologies, but technologies are available elsewhere. Israel, many of these countries are actually using those technologies, but very often they are not affordable for our farmers, and very often our farmers' social and economic background is also not something where they can absorb a technology from Israel and start using it and all of that. There is a price point which is very important. If you are launching a product in those markets, $100, $200 is not a big deal. But if you are launching it for Indian farmers, it has to be a few dollars, less than $10, like 500 rupees kind of a sensor. What costs outside, let's say 10,000, 20,000 rupees, needs to cost here 100 rupees, 200 rupees. Now, how do you make those technologies affordable for the farmers? So you need to do an indigenous development, and making high technology affordable for farmers is a much bigger research problem than anything else that one can imagine. And because of our background in working on prototypes and product kind of a development, when we heard all these problems, it looked like a very interesting problem. And one of the very first projects we started was a soil moisture sensor. We said if you can measure the soil moisture and then advise the farmer that you don't have to use any more water, and now if you can maintain the soil moisture in this range, then your crop productivity goes up, and you also don't waste water. And so therefore it serves both the purposes of improving the yield and also reducing the water usage. And so we developed then the goal was, how do you develop these technologies at a cost which is so low for an Indian farmer, and taking into fact that the educational background of farmers, the social background of farmers, how should these technology be packaged? So we started working with agricultural scientists. We interacted closely with the Agricultural University in Hyderabad. We interacted closely with IARI, and then we started to formulate the problem. We put students, and now we are successful in developing a very low cost soil moisture sensor. And just couple of months ago, the students who graduated, they started a company called Soil Sense Technologies Private Limited, and now they are working with various government agencies and trying to come up with a business model innovation. In all of this, you also need to innovate on the business model, and they are trying to work with the government, work with the farmers. They are testing the soil moisture sensors in various fields, and now they are trying to take it to the market. And these students, having PhDs from IIT Bombay, could have found a job anywhere of their choice, but they thought that this is a project which can make a big social impact.
And also bring high technology to our country in a very low cost way. So it's a very important point. We need to take a very short break. We'll take a very short break. Keep watching Eureka. After the break, I'm going to ask him a very important and interesting question. IIT Delhi is the top institute in India, but it's not part of the Global 100. Why we are not there? That's a question that I'm going to ask after the break. Keep watching Eureka. We'll continue this conversation. Welcome back to Eureka, and we are having a very interesting conversation with Professor V. Ram Gopal Rao, Director of Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. You are now a director of this premium institute, which is, I think, if we put a ranking in India, would be the top ranked institute in India. But we are not in the global 100, and everybody is talking about it. Why? What do you think are the reasons?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think it's also important for people to know why not a single Indian institution figures in the top 100. And I can, when you look at the global ranking, they look at multiple parameters. One of the parameters, is research output. Now, if you look at the research output of IIT Delhi or any other, one of the older IITs, the research output is comparable to an institution in US which is ranked 30 or 40 or below 50 kind of a thing. So, number of papers, research papers written per faculty, on that score, IIT Delhi publishes many more papers than a 50th ranked American university, which is what the numbers actually show. And if you say that, okay, you are only writing papers, but the impact is not there, that is also not true. One of the ways we judge impact of a research is how many people have cited your research, how many people have given reference to your paper. Even on that count, many of our older IITs are again within the top 50 worldwide. So therefore, when it comes to research output, Indian institutions are doing very well. They are in the top 50, at least the older IITs.
If we take only that factor.
Only that factor. But then when they also do this world ranking, sitting in those countries, for them, if you are so good, worldwide, why they expect that lots of students from all over the world come and study at you at your institution, and faculty from all over the world come and teach at your institution. On those factors, when you look at IITs, we don't score very well. Now at IIT Delhi, for example, or even IIT Bombay, where I come from, our foreign students are 1% of our total students. And the reason for that is also very obvious. I mean, we are rejecting at places like IIT Delhi or IIT Bombay, our selection rate is 1 out of 200, 1 out of 300 in any program that we take. If you are rejecting 199 students out of the Indian aspirants, there was never any reason or any motivation for us to go out and seek students to come to our institutes, because it was always about all our exams are all designed to reject people, not to select people, because there was so much of demand for this education. So it never made sense for us, because it were all public funded institutes. We thought that our primary goal is to serve the public in India, and our goal was not to recruit or admit lots of foreign students kind of a thing. So therefore, it was never the mandate of IITs to become global.
So if you separate out the different factors of how the ranking is done, you are saying that on many of the counts we are not that bad. That's what.
So in terms of foreign students, where we score 0. In terms of foreign faculty, we score 0. Again, it's a government policy, because the government jobs, giving to foreigners, there is still in the education sector, that kind of a globalization has not taken place. And this is all the policies of government of India, the visa norms, and all of them come in our way. So we were not able to admit more foreign students. We were not able to recruit more foreign faculty. On those counts, we score a 0 kind of a thing. And also the faculty student ratio, because we need to recruit faculty only from people of Indian origin or Indians, that pool also is very limited. With so many IITs now, there are 23 IITs today, and all of us are competing for those few PhDs, kind of candidates. So as a result, that pool is very limited. So we are not able to recruit enough faculty. The faculty student ratio again has become very bad in all the older IITs. There we get a 0 marks. So 0 for foreign students, 0 for foreign faculty, 0 for faculty student ratio, and perceptions. For many people still, India is not a technology kind of a country. When they still think about India, they have a certain perception about India. So therefore, perception also plays a role in the ranking. There again we score low marks, and that is the reason why we are not actually doing very well in terms of ranking. And it's not because we are not not because we are not imparting good education, not because we are not doing good quality research. That is still happening that is on those counts we are in the top 50. But because of these other factors, we are not able to score in the top.
Now shifting to other factor, I mean, you studied in a Telugu medium. it was in such a case that, for example, you were not even able to write, entrance exam for IIT because it was conducted only in English in those days. How come you have become this much? I mean, what made you go for this?
No, it's a very interesting kind of a question. I had a very interesting journey, and I started my career in a small village, a town, I would call it, Kolhapur, in Telangana state. And I studied in Telugu medium until my 12th standard. And I had no exposure to English. English was a second language, but I never spoke English to anybody for 5 minutes until I graduated until I finished my 12th standard. So therefore, and JEE, all these IIT exams were never an option, and even now they are not an option, because these JEE exams for IITs are also only conducted in English and now in Hindi. But that time, it was only English, and for us, coming out of those small towns in Telangana, the local entrance exam, going to a local college were all what meant. So I did my BTech in Telangana state itself, and then, but my turning point was going to IIT Bombay for my MTech.
Okay.
So I could not, I had no option but to study locally because of my Telugu medium education. But once I went to Bombay for my IIT Bombay for my MTech, that was my turning point. And there I could see the best faculty, the best students, the best infrastructure. That motivated me to aspire higher.
Okay.
Otherwise, until that time, I did not know what I want to do. And I wanted to graduate, get a government job.
And you were also pointing out that today young people have a very closed mind. They need to have open mind. Can you relate to this?
In my case, for example, I think that my growth has always been because of my open-minded attitude. I wanted to experience many things. I wanted to sample whatever that are available to me as opportunities, and then decide what is best for me. Until I joined my MTech in IIT Bombay, I had no idea what I wanted to do. But after MTech, I wanted to study further, so I did my PhD. And after doing PhD, then I started to look at, I am good in research. I had other jobs, but then I realized that I am good in research. So that was how I started, spending more time on research and all of that. And then I, because of my connect to the society, since I come from a rural background, that always stayed with me. And I have always been able to, think of what the society problems are and look at how research can benefit the society. So that connect is because of my background, which I am quite proud of, in fact.
Very, very interesting. I mean, we had a very, very interesting conversation from your work to your perspective on developing IITs, to about what you feel that young people should be doing in this country, keeping their mind open and not just have a fixation that this is what I am going to do very, very, very early. I mean, try out, experience out. These are all very important points, I think, coming out of this conversation. We had a very, very wonderful conversation. Keep watching Eureka. We'll come back with another conversation next week.